Hello everyone, I'm Lee Pacchia, and you are watching The Business of Law, the only web TV show focusing on the challenges and opportunities facing the legal profession. Great show coming up today. We are diving into the financial data. Some firms are beginning to announce their 2013 financial results, and here to walk us through it, I'm happy to say we have Kent Zimmermann. He's a consultant at the Zeughauser Group. Thanks for coming back. Long time.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So reports are in. What's the big takeaway? How is the AmLaw 100 doing compared to previous years?
Not bad is what I would say, considering all the change that's happening in the industry. Just to cut to the chase, the numbers, gross revenue and profits per equity partner, we're going to see up at about 2–2.5% in both categories. Many industries would be envious of that. There's been a lot written about how the industry is in great turmoil, and it's true, we're an industry in transition. There is a lot of change. However, the death has been greatly exaggerated of large law firms. 2% would be the envy of many industries, and also if you look at profit margins, last year the legal industry, the top 200 firms, saw an average profit margin of 36%. That would be prized in just about every other industry. Some firms that are really hitting the cover off the ball, they're at Gibson Dunn, for example, 60% margins. Quinn Emanuel up in that range also. So there are many firms that are doing strong. The industry is segmenting even more than it has in the past. There is to a larger extent, a group of haves and have-nots, and the haves are pulling away. The haves, the highly profitable firms, they benefit from compounding. So as their rate base gets higher and higher, when they grow at 2% off a very high base, they start to widen up a chasm that leaves the other firms behind. But there are a number of firms, if you look at the 2013 results over 2012, that are really performing with a lot of strength. You've got Hogan Lovells up 10% in profits per equity partner. They, as you remember, did an international deal and became Hogan Lovells a few years ago. Mm-hmm. That firm is really realizing on the promise of building an international platform.
That's a merger that worked out.
That's not always the case. It's a merger that's worked out in spades, is what I would say. They really have recognized on the platform. They've grown both in Asia and Europe, particularly here in the U.S. Steve Immolt is taking the reins there. He's going to come in as the new chair. He's the brother of the General Electric chairman, Jeff Immolt. He's taking over from Warren Gorell, who I know and have great respect for, and has really gotten the firm, along with his partners, to where it is now. They have a very powerful chief marketing officer in Jolene Overbeck, who's well known in the industry and has made great strides for the firm with her team. Vincent & Elkins up 16% in profits last year, riding the energy wave down in Texas. They have become one of the strongest firms in history on M&A mergers in the energy industry. Latham has gone into Houston recently and has made that market even more competitive, but Vincent & Elkins remains very robust. Simpson Thacher also on M&A activity up 19%. Aiken Gump, strong base in Texas, 19%. Davis Polk up 20% on M&A activity. So there is a group of firms that's really performing with great strength.
Mm-hmm. One area of concern and one thing that jumps out at me, hours are down, but fees are up. Now, are fees up because law firms are just getting better at collecting on bills, or are they raising prices?
Both. So the firms are raising their rates successfully, particularly for high-rate work. There's a lot of data in this regard. The high rates are more elastic than the low rates. And when I say high rates, the data says that rates over $800 an hour for partners and over $500 for associates, they can go up, get raised much more quickly than lower rates. It seems a little counterintuitive, sure, but the data says it's the high rates that you could raise more quickly. So they're raising their rates and they're also shortening their collection cycles. And those two things together have really helped the profits of some of the highest performing firms.
So what are some of the practice areas that allow law firms to raise their rates when we're seeing shrinking demand across the board? I mean, are these just practice areas where demand is going in the other direction?
You know, it's practice areas where the result is often more important than how much you pay for the legal service. So when you're doing a bet the company M&A transaction, mm-hmm, how much you're paying for the legal fees is often less important than the result you get in the transaction. Or if you're litigating an IP case and you're a drug company trying to protect your rights to a patent on a pharma product that makes you a lot of money, you care a lot more about the result than the legal fees, right, you're paying. So when you put yourself in a position to actually make a game-changing move for the company that you're representing, you often have more leverage to be able to charge them because they're getting more value from the services you're delivering.
Those are the kinds of engagements, though, that are hard to predict over the long term. So it's just got to be maddening for people running large law firms.
It can be maddening, particularly if they have a practice mix that includes a number of practices that are perceived increasingly as commodities. Mm-hmm. And what happens is, if you have a great mix of practices and some are high rate, some are low rate, it's more difficult than if you choose to focus your resources in a limited number of areas to become among the best in high rate, high margin practices. And so if you look at the high performing firms, you see them increasingly picking a small number of markets. And when I say markets, I mean practice areas, industry sectors, and geographies. They pick a small number of markets. They decide that they're going to double down on those and become the best or among the best in them, and then they use their resources to advance their strategy to become preeminent in those areas. And when they pick areas that are high rate and high margin, it really fast forwards their financial performance.
One area that I want to talk to you about is bankruptcy work. It's almost down 7% year over year.
Yes.
It feels like this has been an area that just has been cratering from the demand side for a long time. If you have a firm that has a bankruptcy group that has a lot of people in it, and you're not best in breed, you're not Weil Gotshal or Kirkland & Ellis, what do you do with the department? I mean, we're talking about years of pain here. Do you continue to carry it, or is it time to cut bait?
Some firms are in a position to invest in areas that are not hot right now and keep them because they will come back later. It's all cyclical. But some firms that don't have breadth and depth in other areas are hard-pressed to ride out the losses year after year. Across the industry, there is generally too many lawyers and not enough work to go around to them. And as a result, average hours are depressed. Average hours in the Immolt 200 down about 100 hours from where they should be for partners. And for firms that have a great focus on an area that's not hot right now, that's not in demand, like bankruptcy, it gets obviously very challenging to carry that area, particularly if they're not balanced out by another area that is hot right now. I'll give you, you mentioned Kirkland, for example. Kirkland obviously has a historic strength in three areas: bankruptcy, high-stakes patent litigation, and they also are in private equity, and one of the strongest in the world in private equity. But those areas balance each other out. When bankruptcy is not doing well, you've got private equity and the IP litigation. And when the economy is poor and private equity isn't as good, you've got bankruptcy. So having a practice mix and strengths where you're able to balance out, based on cyclical purposes, strengths that sometimes are good if the economy is good. If the economy is bad, you've got something else. Much better to be balanced like that than not. For firms that are just focused on bankruptcy, this is obviously a hard time.
Last time you were on the show, ancient history as it were, you focused on the idea of viewing PPEP numbers rather on a 5-year timeline rather than on a 1-year timeline. When we get to know more about what happened in 2013, a trend's emerging. Something like 3 firms are seeing double-digit declines, and over 50 are seeing double-digit increases.
Isn't that something else?
Yeah. I mean, it makes me question what the media has been doing the last 5 years, talking about the death of BigLaw's.
This is a great industry. The future is bright, and it's a resilient industry. Will every firm perform with strength? No. Will some not make it and fail? Probably. But in the big, if you step back and you look at the 5-year performance from 2009 to 2013, as you say, only 3 firms that have released their numbers for this year so far saw double-digit declines in profits, and over 50 firms that have released the results for this year saw double-digit profitability increases since 2009. So in the big, when you put that profit gain together with the average margins in the mid-30s, this is a great industry. Everything is relative. We had a golden spree for 17 years leading up to 2008. Every year, profits were better than the last year. Revenue is better than the last year. And so when there was a little dip, people freak out a little bit. In fact, it's a very strong, it's a very resilient industry, and there's many more firms performing with great strength than those that aren't, is what I would say.
So earlier in the interview, you divided BigLaw into the haves and have-nots. For those clients of yours who fall into the have-nots category, what's their game plan for 2014? How do they get into the other column?
So for both the have-nots and many of the haves, firms performing with strength, there is still a lot of very quiet right sizing. Right sizing is the polite term. Others would say they're counseling people out. They're looking to make sure that their supply of talent is balanced with the demand that they're seeing for their services. And so many firms are still looking at chronically underperforming partners, partners who have hours over 2, 3, 4 years that are well below expectations in the firm. And if there's not a way to get them up to the expectations, they're counseling them out. That's still happening a lot. Also, many firms are sharpening their focus on what they want to be known for in the market. Some firms are realizing, you know what, we're known for doing a lot of things, but there's 3 or 4 things that really we've got a strong lead in, and rather than trying to grow in 10 or 20 areas, let's pick 3 or 4, and when it comes to our marketing and business development efforts, when it comes to our lateral recruiting, when it comes to where and how we're going to grow, let's make sure we fast forward our strategy in those 3 to 4 areas as a priority rather than just trying to grow everything equally. And so many firms are narrowing in and doubling down on their strengths. But I'll just say the heavy lifting is in getting consensus in the firm around making those choices and deciding what you want to focus on. And the firms that perform with strength often have had hard conversations among the partners in their firms, and they've made smart choices. It's important to make choices is kind of a big takeaway for firms as they develop their strategy.
Building consensus with partners in offices all around the world in large numbers. I mean, it's got to be like getting a room full of cats to get in line at the same time. I mean, that can't be easy.
You're right. They're all around the world, and they're smart, rich people. And they're smart, rich people who don't necessarily want to be led. And so it's very challenging for people who are running large law firms to be able to lead these geographically dispersed, very smart, very successful, often very wealthy people. It's very challenging. There are leaders of many firms, though, who have done that with great success. And there's an art to building that consensus. It's not typically about cramming down on your partners, hey, this is how we're going to grow. I've developed a strategic plan, here it is, and foisting it upon them. But there's an art to actually getting input, building consensus, and it's not easy, and that doesn't come naturally to most leaders in the legal space. And those that have succeeded in growing firms, particularly over a short amount of time, look at what DLA did in under 9 years. Look what Hogan Lovells is doing. Look at what Baker McKenzie did over a much longer period of time. They are growing very successful global brands, and they're able to do that with consensus among their partners. It's not easy to do, but there are firms that are doing it with success.
Before we let you go, what's on your radar for mergers in 2014? Are we going to see more law firms tied to the knot?
Yeah, we're definitely in a consolidating industry. Here in New York this morning, I was in a merger conversation, and there's a lot of that activity going on right now. We're going to see a number of smaller deals like we did last year. There were about 88 deals last year. The vast majority of those were acquisitions, large firms looking at firms 10, 20, 30, 50 people. We'll see more of that. We may also see at least 1 or 2 mergers of equals this year. There weren't any last year if you look at the data.
We got close, though.
We got close. There already are some talks percolating this year. And the other thing I would add is it's not just here in the U.S. that we'll see consolidation activity. In China, in Europe, there are firms that follow the U.S. trend. They see the benefits in size. They realize that if they want to be a global leader, it's not going to be easy to build that organically. Or if they realize that they want to be a global leader or even a national leader in a particular industry, in energy, in finance, in M&A, they realize that sometimes it's easier to fast forward the strategy to combine rather than to go it alone.
Let me ask you a really difficult question. If you were to prognosticate and guess where the next global footprint firm is going to come from, geographically, where would it be? I mean, are we talking about an American firm that's going to cross over the threshold? Is it going to be European? Is it going to be from somewhere else?
You know, the U.S. legal market is obviously far and away the largest in the world by spend. More money is spent on litigation just in the U.S. than is spent on legal services of all kinds in all other countries combined. So the U.S. is a behemoth. And so there's a pretty good chance that the next global law firm brand that's created will have a significant U.S. component. Part of the reason why Asian firms look across the Pacific to the U.S., why the Europeans look across the Atlantic to the U.S., is because if you want to be a global leader in the legal space, you have to have a piece of the U.S. Legal spend. There's really not a way to get there today without having a significant slice of the U.S. Legal spend. And so that provides great interest. But then the U.S. firms look at how quickly the economies are growing in other places in the world, in China, in Latin America. Not long, Africa is going to be a big focus and already is a focus for some global firms that are growing there. And the Chinese money is central to the development of some of those regions, and the Chinese firms get that. They are very hungry. There are already a number of very large Chinese firms that have grown organically, and they're also looking at consolidating within China, and over time they want to do deals that cross the Pacific. So I think U.S. consolidation, we'll see it continue, but also don't forget and be on the lookout for deals in other countries, intra-China deals, intra-European deals, and cross-border deals as well.
Wild stuff. Kent,
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for having me.
That's what we have for this week. If you'd like to see more of what we're working on, be sure to check us out on YouTube and on Twitter. I'm Lee Pacchia. See you next week.